You've seen Pride and Prejudice. You've seen Downton twice. But I promise you this, half the period dramas on this list you've never watched, and the other half you've probably forgotten were even made. These are the best historical miniseries ever made. Every one of them 6 episodes or less, and not a single one wastes your time. If you're into the whole Tudor thing, you've seen a dozen takes on Elizabeth I, but this BBC miniseries is the one that actually makes her feel real. It follows Elizabeth from her early years, dodging execution under Mary Tudor, to her final days as queen. You get the big historical set pieces, the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, the Spanish Armada, her complicated thing with the Earl of Essex. But the best thing here is how it goes deep on her relationship with Robert Dudley. Tom Hardy plays Dudley, and he and Anne-Marie Duff as Elizabeth have this chemistry that just never turns into a soap opera. You can see the shift in Elizabeth's look over the years, from the basic gowns to those full-on iconic queen costumes. They didn't cheap out on any of it. The timeline is compressed, of course, but they stick close to real events. You get all the big moments, but they never lose sight of Elizabeth as a person. She's tough, she's clever, and you also see just how much being the Virgin Queen cost her. The miniseries won an Emmy for costume design, but the real win is how it pulls you inside Elizabeth's head. I went into this one because of Charles Dance, but to be fair, I wasn't expecting much, because ITV period dramas are always hit or miss for me. But the scale here is massive. There's full-on recreations of 1666 London, actual flames everywhere, costumes and sets that look like they came right out of a museum. The story follows Thomas Fariner, the baker whose shop started the whole disaster. You get the panic, the confusion, families running through burning streets, and the sense that nobody has a clue what to do. The show throws in a ton of fictional material just for entertainment value. There's a Catholic assassination plot, a made-up spy master, and a whole layer of royal court intrigue. I feel like the conspiracy plot is completely unnecessary. It's like the writers thought the fire alone wouldn't be enough, so they needed a villain. The best parts are always the actual fire. When they actually show you failed fire breaks, the exodus across the Thames, people trying to survive. If you want to see London burn and get a sense of what people went through, it's worth a watch. Just don't expect total historical accuracy. If you haven't seen this one, you're missing out on a genuinely warm, low-key coming-of-age story set in early 1800s England. Molly Gibson, just an ordinary country doctor's daughter, suddenly gets thrown into a whole new world when her dad remarries. Suddenly, she's got a vain stepmother and a stepsister who seems to flirt with everyone in sight. What I like is how none of this turns into soap opera melodrama. It's just quietly real. You've got social snubs, friendships, and eventually, this really believable slow-burn romance between Molly and the squire's son. The original novel by Elizabeth Gaskell was never finished. She died before writing the ending. But the BBC adaptation actually gives Molly a satisfying, fully written conclusion. The whole thing is put together by Andrew Davies, the same guy behind Pride and Prejudice, and you can tell there's not a single scene that looks cheap or rushed. The BBC basically threw all their costume budget at this, filming at places like Great Chalfield Manor and Levens Hall, so the setting actually feels lived in. And also, Michael Gambon is here. He plays Squire Hamley, and he steals every scene he's in, even won a BAFTA for it. I'm talking about the 90s version here with Carla Gugino and Mira Sorvino, not the newish Apple TV series. The Buccaneers adapts Edith Wharton's last novel, the one she never finished. It's about 4 rich American girls in the 1870s, crossing the Atlantic to find aristocratic husbands in London. The draw here is how they crash up against the British class system, and how most of the marriages are about money and titles, not romance. Nan, the main character, ends up stuck between a boring duke and the man she actually wants. BBC put real money into this one, but I'm not sure it actually works on every level. The screenwriter Maggie Wadey created a whole new ending for Nan. There's a big romantic gesture that Edith Wharton probably never would have written herself. And also, there are added subplots, like a court romance that's clearly written for modern audiences. Fans of Wharton hated the made-up ending, called it sensational and out of step with the novel's realism. I think the show works as pure drama, but you can't call it a faithful Wharton adaptation. That said, you get a lavish production, and there's enough energy in the cast and setting to keep it moving. This is the Anne Bronte adaptation most people never talk about, but it's easily one of the best. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is bold even by today's standards. You get Helen Graham, a widow who moves into Wildfell Hall and immediately gets the local gossip mill going. But it's not just about village drama. Through Helen's own diary, you find out she ran away from an abusive alcoholic husband, which was about as scandalous as it gets in 1848. She's determined to protect herself and her son, and it's clear she's not interested in fitting into the neat little box Victorian society had ready for her. Watching this adaptation, what stands out is how much grit it keeps from the original book. A lot of period dramas will sand off the edges and make everything tasteful, but not here. This one keeps all the darkness. The Yorkshire settings feel bleak and real. Costumes nail the early 19th century look, and the whole thing avoids the usual Victorian polish. You feel the tension in every scene between Helen and Gilbert Markham as he tries to break through her reserve. Tara Fitzgerald and Toby Stephens are both perfect in these roles. I'm always surprised how faithful this series is to Bronte's original, right down to the proto-feminist themes and how Helen refuses to just accept her fate. Out of all the Dickens adaptations, Our Mutual Friend might be the most underrated and easily one of the most visually striking. It opens right in the middle of the action. There's a body pulled from the Thames, an inheritance up for grabs, and a tangle of characters all chasing money or love or just a better place in Victorian society, and every storyline packed into a tight 6-episode run. The BBC pulled out all the stops for this one. The adaptation sticks close to the novel, but it's not afraid to lean into Dickens's dark humor and moral messiness. The cast is loaded with talent. Keeley Hawes, Paul McGann, David Morrissey, all early in their careers. The whole thing looks incredible. The slums, the fancy drawing rooms, all of it feels like real London, not some cardboard set. The show plays around with flashbacks and non-linear scenes, and it actually makes the story feel more modern, less stiff than a lot of other adaptations. Some of the smaller subplots get trimmed down, but you never feel like you're missing anything important. It picked up 4 BAFTAs, including Best Drama Serial, and it deserves it. Aristocrats follows the real lives of the Lennox sisters, daughters of the Duke of Richmond, across the entire second half of the 18th century. 4 sisters, all raised at the center of English high society, end up taking completely different paths. One marries into Irish nobility and gets tangled in Ireland's political upheaval. Another runs off with a commoner and shocks the family. The third one becomes a society hostess, and the youngest almost marries King George III before everything goes sideways for her. The source material is fantastic, real letters and diaries. And that means the show has a kind of honesty you don't get from most inspired by true events period pieces. This series stands out for how much care goes into the details. It's based on Stella Tilliard's biography, and you can see the research in everything. The clothes, the sets, the lighting, even the wigs. They shot a lot of it on location in Ireland, so nothing feels fake or stagey. Major historical events shape everything. They actually cover American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Irish Rebellion. Most of the characters are drawn straight from the real people involved. It's impressive how they managed to balance the sheer scale of the politics with the sisters' actual personal stories. Set in the 1780s Bristol, Respectable Trade is about Frances Scott, a gentlewoman who's lost her money and options. She marries Josiah Cole, a merchant whose business is the slave trade, buying and selling African people for profit. Josiah brings enslaved men into their home, including Mahuru, who was a prince in his homeland before being trafficked. Frances is naive at first. She doesn't ask questions about where Josiah's money comes from or what happens to the people he owns. That starts to change as she spends time with Mahuru. They form a bond, and it puts her at odds with her husband and with society around her. The show spends a lot of time on daily details. Ledgers, contracts, ships loaded with chained men, the treatment of enslaved people inside the house, and the city's social life. And the ending isn't a neat romance or happy resolution, which is kind of rare. This is the one where Thackeray's classic turns into a miniseries that actually does justice to the book. The whole thing is built around Becky Sharp. She's a poor girl, totally immoral, who's got enough brains and nerve to play the whole of Regency Society for fools. Natasha Little as Becky is the best casting choice like ever. She sells every bit of Becky's scheming, and you still almost want to see her win. Around her is Amelia, the gentle friend whose story goes up and down with the Napoleonic Wars. The series jumps between London drawing rooms and the ballrooms of Brussels right before Waterloo. You get romance, all the behind-the-scenes games about money and class, and plenty of moments where virtue gets you nowhere and status is everything. The details are all there. Waterloo staged for real, continental high society actually filmed on location. England, Wales, France, Germany. The production's a level up from most BBC stuff. Costumes are spot on, everything looks and feels right for the era, and you can see the money on screen. The script by Andrew Davies is actually tight. You get the best of Thackeray's dialogue, plus a bit of dark comedy, but nothing dragged out. This miniseries got 6 BAFTA nominations, and I think it actually deserved even more. Anthony Trollope's adaptation is a Victorian satire that takes you straight into the middle of London's money-obsessed world. Augustus Melmoth blows into town and basically hypnotizes the whole elite with a fake railway scheme. Around him, you've got Felix Carberry, broke aristocrat chasing Melmoth's daughter for her cash, Hedda, his sister, stuck in a mess of family and romance, and a crowd of social climbers and would-be millionaires who all want in on the action. This series is 4 episodes, but it doesn't waste a frame. David Yates directed this before Harry Potter, and what stands out here is how the script keeps Trollope's dialogue almost word for word in a lot of scenes. Greed, anti-Semitic undertones, speculation mania, class snobbery, it's all there, and it makes the whole thing feel sharp and relevant. David Suchet's Melmoth is one of the best TV villains, BAFTA nominated, completely believable, especially when he faces Parliament. The series took home the BAFTA for Best Drama Serial, and it holds up. Daniel Deronda is set in the 1870s England, adapted from George Eliot's last novel, and it's a story you don't see much on TV. It's actually 2 stories running in parallel. One follows Gwendolyn Harleth, a classic beauty, but her luck goes bad fast. She loses everything, marries the absolute worst aristocrat, and her life unravels. The other side of the story is Daniel himself, raised as an English gentleman but always wondering where he really belongs. His life changes when he saves Mira, a Jewish singer, and starts learning about Jewish culture, community, and eventually discovers his own Jewish heritage. Visually, the show goes all out. Tom Hooper directs it like a prestige film. Country houses, glittering casinos, Jewish festivals that actually look alive. The script sticks close to Eliot's original dialogue. I didn't expect to see a BBC period piece handle Victorian Jewish life this thoughtfully. There's no exoticizing, no stereotypes, just real empathy, and for once, a respectful, detailed look at a world you barely see on screen. Romola Garai and Hugh Dancy are perfect in the leads, and Hugh Bonneville, Anne-Marie Duff. Every single performance lands. This one's based on Anthony Trollope's novel. Lewis and Emily Trevelyan start out happy, but Lewis's jealousy turns the whole story into a tragedy. He obsesses over Emily's friendship with Colonel Osborne. There's nothing going on, but Lewis convinces himself otherwise. Watching him spiral out, you see how paranoia, pride, and Victorian society all work together to destroy people's lives. But what really makes this series work isn't just the misery. Trollope, and the adaptation by Andrew Davies, threads in 2 lighter subplots, a love triangle with a vicar and spinster sisters, and a romantic story about Emily's sister with her own obstacles. These stories bring humor and warmth, and the way the show moves between comedy and domestic tragedy is something you don't see pulled off this well very often. The period detail is spot on, the costumes, the sets, but more than that, the way it shows the reality of Victorian marriage law. how easily a woman's reputation could be destroyed, and the real powerlessness so many faced. This one drops you straight into the chaos of the English Civil War in mid-1600s, and the whole thing plays like an epic adventure, only with actual stakes. The main character, Angelica Fanshawe, isn't a figure you'll find in a history book, but that's what makes it work. She's this free-spirited noblewoman who ends up tossed around by everything going on. You watch her lose her world, try to figure out who to trust, and see her brush up against everyone who mattered. There's Edward Sexsby, a real leveler soldier, Oliver Cromwell, King Charles I. Through her, you see the court life collapse, battles break out, and England get turned upside down. She falls in love, gets in duels, stirs up political intrigue, and by the end, you really believe why she earned the nickname the Devil's Whore. The whole thing is just 4 episodes, but it never feels rushed. It hits the big historical moments, trial of Charles I, Cromwell's power grabs, but always through Angelica's eyes. The writers take some liberties, sure. The characters and every woman inspired by real women of the era, and the timeline is streamlined to fit into those 4 hours. Some historians got annoyed about the creative license, but honestly, I get it. You want to make people care about history, you have to tell a story. It's rare you see this period dramatized at all, and even rarer to see it feel this alive. Desperate Romantics is 6 episodes of Victorian painters and poets acting like total rock stars, right in the middle of 1850s London. Dante Gabriel Rossetti, William Holman Hunt, John Millais, they're not stiff, tragic geniuses here. The show plays them as young and ambitious artists chasing fame, fortune, and pretty girls. This one's way more modern than you'd expect. The dialogue isn't trying to sound like the 1850s. The whole thing feels more like Entourage with easels than a standard BBC period piece. The show covers all the big moments. Rossetti's muse Lizzie Siddal battling addiction and heartbreak, Millais painting Ophelia while falling for his friend's wife, Hunt getting obsessed and making bad choices. You see the art get made, and the mess that comes with it. Is it historically perfect? Not even close. Timelines get compressed, personalities get tweaked, and some characters are mashed together or exaggerated for effect. But the look is great, and it's just a fun ride, although completely historically inaccurate. This one is a 2-part mini-series about some of the most violent power struggles in British history, Mary Queen of Scots and her son James I. The first half follows Mary, her return to Scotland, disastrous marriages, betrayals everywhere, and her final showdown with Elizabeth I. The second half jumps ahead. Now her son James is on the throne, England is a powder keg, and the infamous Gunpowder plot is about to go off. Catholic conspirators try to blow up Parliament and assassinate James, but they get caught, and the fallout is violent. What really stands out is how much detail they pack in. There's real grit, blood, and tension in every scene. They filmed a lot of it in Romania, so you get that cold, muddy, medieval look. It's only 2 episodes, but you feel like you've watched an entire season of political scheming and violence. The dialogue is sharp, the characters feel real, and you actually see both monarchs as human beings, not just symbols. Some historians complain about the compressed timelines, but it all makes sense in the story. And it's always nice to see early Michael Fassbender and Peter Capaldi before they blew up.